So you want to be confident, and you have probably watched a trillion videos on this topic before landing here. And at this point, the secret code to confidence seems impossible to crack. And it leaves you wondering why it is that some people are born with this unbelievable, maddening, deep pocket of confidence, acting like they own every room they walk into, and others just don't seem to get it. And thinking about it, who doesn't want to be that first person? I know I do. So just like many of you, I tried a lot, I watched a lot, changed my presentation to the world with the affirmations, but in the end, the moments when I really wanted the confidence, unconfident me always came out. But here's the weird thing. Sometimes I felt like that, a complete, insecure, hopeless mess, and other times I felt strong and calm even when I was making mistakes. So why is that? Well, I dove deep into the matter for you guys. The research papers, my own years of overly dramatic journaling about confidence. And by doing all of that, I found out one of confidence little secrets, which you haven't heard about before. It's the weird way in which our physiological state impacts our confidence. So often, way more than our mindset does. And realizing that a large part of my confidence crash was biological, that changed everything for me. So in this video, I will explain to you the mind-blowing ways in which your body's internal balance determines your confidence, how this physical state can actually be the cause of your mindset and negative thoughts, but also, of course, I won't let that part out, I'm going to tell you how to go from that unconfident state to a more dominant, confident, and socially easy state. Okay, first, to understand why you feel like a loser or winner, we have to go to the bottom of the ocean. It's time for the story of the lobster. Now, neuroscientists have actually studied lobsters for decades to understand the biology of dominance and aggression. But why on earth would they look at a creature that wears a skeleton on the outside? I mean, they obviously don't have a complex brain like ours. Well, the answer is hidden in the ancient history of our nervous system. We are talking about neurochemical systems that emerged more than 350 million years ago. That's older than the dinosaurs. And even more old than Jurassic Park 1. When you look at a lobster's nervous system, you're looking at one of the earliest blueprints for how our nervous systems organize dominance, power, stress, and social rank. And in evolution, if something works, it rarely gets deleted. New layers just get built on top of it. Of course, we are very different from lobsters, and it's not necessarily comparing apples with apples here, but the electrical principles inside their neurons in their nerve cells still follow a lot of the same basic biological rules as ours. So here we go. The lobster obsession started in 1980 with scientists Edwards and Kravitz, because they were curious about how chemicals like serotonin impact aggression and social status. And what they discovered is that if you take a lobster and give it a serotonin injection, it suddenly takes on a dominant posture. It looks bigger and it becomes much more willing to fight, even after defeat. So it's also willing to quicker move back into battle. Okay, before we dive deeper into this topic, let's address where you might have heard this before, which could be psychologist Jordan B. Peterson, as he often uses these studies in his talks, and he actually uses it to defend the natural appearances of hierarchies. And, I don't necessarily have an opinion on that, but what I think that he misses to mention is the point that is actually valuable to you, which is the fact that your lack of confidence is not a character flaw. It's not a lack of willpower, it is a physical setting on, your motherboard. Let me explain why. To do this, let's start by dissecting one of the most misunderstood molecules in the body, serotonin, because it's the key to understanding the way that your body drives confidence. Okay, many people will hear serotonin and think, oh, that's the happiness molecule. But in neuroscience, serotonin, formerly known as 5-hydroxytryptamine, is actually a neuromodulator and a neurotransmitter that carries chemical messages between nerve cells in your brain and throughout your body. It's made by, your body, from the amino acid tryptophan, which you can get from food. And the truth is, serotonin does so much. It doesn't just make you happy. It also regulates your mood, your focus, your emotional stability. It helps you regulate your sleep, but also it helps you with wound healing, digestion, sexual drive. But today we're going to focus on its association with mood, confidence, and social status. What has been found is that high serotonin is associated with dampening overreactions and stabilizing behavior, while low serotonin is associated with responses more impulsive and aggressive. This is, by the way, also why drugs that affect serotonin, like SSRIs, solely over weeks, or in a sudden charge like MDMA, can shift your behavior to extreme levels by altering the way that your brain processes social threats. Now, the real key here is that serotonin acts like a gain controller for your brain, adjusting how strongly your circuits react to social cues, threats, and opportunities. So, going back to our fighting lobsters. In a normal setting, when a lobster loses a fight, it develops a loser mentality. It hides and it refuses to fight for days. Now, as we now know, the study of Edwards and Kravitz proved that injecting serotonin into a lobster makes them take on a more dominant stance and also makes them move quicker back into battle. Now, while that might be sparking some ideas with you guys, like why don't we just go injecting more serotonin, right? Well, not quite. And why not? Well, let's imagine two different phones. One is at 3% and the other is at, let's say, 80%. I think we can say that the 3% phone is often slower and performs weaker than the 80% phone. And just like serotonin drives our mood and social energy, electricity drives, charges the phone. If more electricity goes in and the battery gets charged, you could make the assumption that more electricity leads to a better performing and faster phone, just like more serotonin might lead to a more dominant lobster or a more socially regulated human. But that's actually not what really happens. What is really going on is that the more the phone's battery is charged, as it goes above a certain threshold, the wiring software switches from a low power mode to a performance mode. You see, the study coming after Edwards' study, et al. From 1996, is the real mind blower in this all, because they found that social status literally rewires the hardware of the lobsters, to the point where more serotonin coming in literally does different things for different lobsters. In a dominant lobster, the system is set to performance mode. The wiring of its neural circuits is configured so that serotonin boosts action. It targets the lateral giant neurons, which control a fast reflexive escape pattern, the tail flip. In this configuration, serotonin increases the responsiveness of the LG circuits, making the lobster quickly respond to certain attacks by using the tail flip escape. But then we have the subordinate lobster in power saving mode. Now, exactly the same amount of serotonin does the opposite. It inhibits the LG neuron cells, and so it inhibits the lobster's tail flip escape. So what et al. Discovered is that the receptors, the antennas in the cell picking up the serotonin, respond in a totally different way. In the 3% phone battery, the system kills your background apps, dims the screen, and slows the processor. Why? Well, to keep the phone from dying completely. And that is also what your nervous system does after a defeat. It blocks your confidence to save energy and prevent further damage. And it makes sense, because if you've already been broken by a situation, it is suicidal to go back out there acting like a winner and getting crushed again. Your brain is literally protecting you by forcing you to be small. Now, you might ask, why would nature ever design a loser mode, right? Science shows that it's actually tactical, because the LG neurons that I mentioned, they control a stereotype and limited flexibility escape. But if you are subordinate, being predictable is dangerous, because they'll see you coming. So in subordinate lobsters, serotonin actually suppresses these giant pathways and fires the non-giant escape pathways, which are slower, but less predictable, more flexible, and in that way, way more strategic for the subordinate lobsters. In human terms, when you're in power saving mode, you might become hypervigilant. You overanalyze, not because you choose to, but because your nervous system is prioritizing caution. Okay, now let's address the part that might seem a little bit contradictory to you. In Edwards' original study, injecting serotonin sometimes made subordinate lobsters suddenly stand taller and act dominant. But that seems to clash with what we just talked about, that subordinate lobsters have their giant pathways suppressed, and instead of that have their non-giant pathway escapes, which makes them less dominant. So why is that? Well, it's all about what state the nervous system is in. And that state depends on timing. You see, the serotonin-injected lobsters in Edward's first study were isolated and hadn't yet become chronically subordinate. Serotonin just cranked up their circuits temporarily. But in later studies, like that of Ye et al., a social order was already established up front. And in that case, more serotonin led to different outcomes. So after repeated losses, the wiring changed long term. For you, that means that when you walk into a room and you feel small, or you have trouble speaking up or making eye contact, it could just mean that you're kind of also in this power-saving mode. Your neurons might currently have more brake receptors than gas receptors. Your brain might have concluded that it is safer to be invisible than to shine. And this is what I have felt so many times, feeling like a loser in certain settings. And then if I just was kind of on like a streak with making mistakes or not feeling good, my spontaneity would just go down. I wouldn't feel like myself anymore. My confidence just completely got crushed. And in these moments, it just felt impossible to escape. And if you have been badly defeated, like maybe you have been bullied, you went through a terrible breakup, your brain can physically change. What happens in mammals is that a subordinate status can be associated with chronic social stress, which can reduce hippocampal plasticity, affecting learning and memory, while the activity of the amygdala, the brain's fear center, increases. Your brain kind of learns the mode and thinks that staying in that mode is literally the only way to survive. That's also what is often going on with a lot of anxiety cases and even PTSD. But before I crush all your hopes, because I might be doing that right now, here's the good news. These settings are not permanent. It's an adaptation. So if you're wondering how to become that dominant lobster and how to go to that performance mode and be confident for longer than 2 or 3 days just spontaneously, stay with me, because I'm sharing it with you now. So this is where it gets interesting. According to Ye et al., after 12 days of pairing and repeated fighting, serotonin reduces the activation of the algae escape circuits in subordinate crayfish and enhances it in dominant ones. So around 12 days of establishment of a stable dominance hierarchy, the nervous system adjusts how it responds to serotonin based on that social history, kind of going from low power to performance mode. But listen closely. In the crayfish studies, even after a change in social rank, the escape circuit didn't immediately change, and it still showed the previous dominant pattern, sometimes for up to 38 days. So even though we're not exactly lobsters, right, we can approach this social status confidence situation in the same manner. Once you build your baseline of confidence, you have a strong biological buffer. So your system doesn't collapse at the first setback anymore. It takes sustained defeat to push it back into power-saving mode. So how do we force this 12-day update? How do we become unstoppable and killing it with confidence? Well, like the lobster, you need to experience small wins. And to do so, you need your serotonin system to be functioning well, because then your brain is more likely to interpret experiences as safe, rewarding, and worth repeating. So I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do to get your body to the perfect state to start your rewiring process. First of all, only about 10% of the serotonin found in your body is produced in your brain. And about 90% of serotonin is found in the cells lining your gastrointestinal tract. So you are guessing it, we are talking food. So step number 1, the tryptophan protocol. Okay, first things first, tryptophan serves as the essential amino acid precursor for serotonin. Our body literally needs it to make serotonin. It's in most protein sources, but some more than others. To highlight how powerful getting enough tryptophan is, there's a study done on humans where they gave tryptophan to participants for over 12 days compared to a placebo, and well, you guess it, quarrelsome behavior dropped. Now, we don't necessarily need to go injecting the stuff ourselves, but we can just eat it. Here is a list of foods that are high in tryptophan: pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, cashews, sunflower seeds, peanuts, soybeans, oats, lentils, almonds, chickpeas, dark chocolate, tempeh, tofu, and quinoa. There are more, but this is already a pretty big list. Now, what you also want to do is pair those foods with some carbs like oats, fruits, or whole grains, so that the tryptophan isn't outcompeted by other amino acids and actually gets a chance to reach your brain. Okay, on to the next, supplementing. If it's difficult for you to get enough tryptophan out of your foods, or you suspect that you are low on serotonin, there are other ways to increase that serotonin, either by taking supplements that provide more building blocks or influence how serotonin signals are regulated, how receptors respond, and how long serotonin stays active in the synapse. Do keep in mind that the research on supplements is still limited and variable, and that what works on some people might not work on everyone. But that being said, some data-backed examples are worth noting. First of all, tryptophan itself can be taken in the form of a supplement. Daily requirement for tryptophan is around 4 milligrams per kilogram of body weight a day, but many supplements contain 600 milligrams or more, and some studies use up to 1 to 3 grams per day to try to boost serotonin. Approach higher doses carefully though, especially if you're combining it with serotonin boosting medication. Then there's 5-HTP. It's a natural amino acid and a direct precursor to serotonin. A 2025 study found that 5-HTP supplementation can modestly improve mood and increase serotonin levels in adults. Next, we've got Cissus quadrangularis. It's a plant extract of the grape family, and it has been studied for its potential to increase circulating serotonin.
Cissus quadrangularis, complicated name, when taken in dosages of about 300 to 600 milligrams, can pretty dramatically increase serotonin levels. In fact, anywhere from 30% to 39% increases in circulating serotonin.
Then myo-inositol, it's a form of sugar and has been explored for reducing anxiety and stabilizing mood, likely by modulating serotonin pathways. Finally, I personally also use saffron. Research suggests that saffron supplementation can improve mood and anxiety in a way comparable to low-dose SSRIs in some trials. Though effects vary and studies are still small, that's still really impressive. I followed Dr. Amen and I saw that he was very fond of it, so I decided to try it out. And I now take it almost every day, and I'm really happy with it. I really do feel more relaxed and socially open. But anyways, how it works is that the active compound in safranol, inhibits the reuptake of serotonin, thereby increasing synaptic serotonin availability. If you try any of these supplements, always do your research and start slow. Don't go assuming that taking everything together or high doses is necessary or safe. And if you are using serotonin boosting medication like SSRIs, be extra careful, as having too much serotonin can also give serotonin syndrome. Now, if you are not taking that strong medication or extreme doses, you've got nothing to worry about. And no, these compounds isolated are not gonna turn you into a complete different person, but remember what we are doing here. We are trying to give our body a little nudge into the right direction so that our nervous system can be retrained into a more self-secured version of ourselves. And what we need to do for that is get the science of the body right. So, the foods and potential supplements if we're not getting enough tryptophan, for example. So, food, supplements, and for the next, keep watching. Third one, okay, maybe not fun for some of you, but it's gonna get excited, I promise, because we are talking movement, and we're also talking about how physical activity can literally reshape your neurochemistry. So, aerobic activity like running and cycling can increase both serotonin and dopamine in the brain, and it can also help tryptophan, the precursor to serotonin that we just talked about, reach your brain easier, resulting in more serotonin production. And remember, more serotonin associated with more social and open and relaxed behavior. At the same time, movement also stimulates dopamine in reward and motivation circuits, enhancing your drive, attention, and goal-directed behavior. So basically, serotonin sets your mood and social confidence, while dopamine tunes your motivation and energy to actually act on it. So together, they prime your brain to feel confident, resilient, and more in control. To be honest, I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't care how easy some people make it seem. And yes, sometimes if you get like into a rhythm, flow, working out can be easy, but during certain periods in your life, it can be such a pain in the ass to even get yourself to your yoga mat for even 5 minutes a day. I'm fully describing myself here, by the way. There's no one-size-fits-all solution here, and the best advice that I can give to you is to go look up the fundamentals of habit forming, and if you don't already know, Google James Clear. But something that worked for me is not telling myself to go work out for a specific amount of time, but break it up in the smallest steps possible. So running for half an hour becomes, I just need to put on my running shoes, and then I'll see how I feel. But anyways, if you are really determined to shake off your unconfidence and anxiety, then you need to explore exercise at least a little. Okay, fourth one, guys, gratitude. No, this is way more than just touchy-feely stuff. Gratitude does not just equal saying thanks more often. It's actually way more powerful than you think, and it's a biological intervention. It involves both being on the receiving end, feeling genuine appreciation towards someone who has done a favor for you, but also the act of giving that gratitude to others, or watching others be grateful, or recalling a time when someone was truly thankful for you actually modulates serotonergic signaling. It physically changes your neurosignaling pathways. By focusing on gratitude, you are essentially training your amygdala, that fear center we talked about, to be less reactive to stress. One study even found that higher proneness to gratitude is correlated with increased gray matter volume in brain regions involved in social cognition and emotional processing. So see if you can incorporate a gratitude practice. You can journal about the things you are grateful for once or twice a week or whenever you find the time, or you can put on a gratitude meditation. I listened to one on Spotify, and I'm not kidding, especially if I haven't done this in a while. I literally sit on a rainbow cuddling puppies. So it really just helps me think about everything that I'm grateful for in this life, and that in turn raises my confidence. So now, next one up, kind of related, but different, its own thing, vividly recalling past successes. When you recall a past win in vivid detail, you're essentially engaged in neural circuits that trigger action and confidence. So visualizing victory kind of tricks your brain into a more dominant state. But how do we incorporate that, and how have I done that? Journal. I mean, yes, you can go daydreaming about this stuff for a couple of days, but I assume that it wouldn't really stick and become a habit. So the best thing that I can come up with is journaling, and getting into the habit of writing 1, 2, or 3 small or big wins in a journaling session every other day, or whatever works for you, is enough to do the trick. And in this way, you are literally training yourself to automatically recall past successes. Just believe me that this will do a lot for your confidence. Okay, now my last point might actually be one of the biggest influences on serotonin for some of you guys. It's about your hormonal foundation. The last couple of months, I have been living through a personal experiment because I quit the pill. And that I did because I noticed something in my journals. Every time that I hit a low, my hormonal consistency taking the pill was a disaster. I was taking the pill, but I wasn't doing it consistently. I'd forget it, take it a couple of hours later. Sometimes I would be too early. Sometimes I forget it a whole day and take it the next day, like twice. And even a couple of hours later wouldn't go unnoticed. I had terrible mood swings and a weak sense of security in myself, especially the week after I was inconsistent. And because I felt this so strong, and also because I struggled with very inconsistent periods when I was younger, I wanted to know if there was something going on with my hormones. Something that might be masked by taking the birth control pill. And what I personally discovered is that it has been very difficult for my natural hormones to get to steady, consistent levels without the pill. You see, the truth is that I also found is that your hormones are impacting your brain, your thoughts, your feelings, and also your confidence. Partly this is because estrogen influences serotonergic activity, receptor sensitivity, and overall serotonergic tone. So even in the case, if you are regular, During the follicular and ovulatory phases, when estrogen is high, you might experience more energy, motivation, and confidence compared to the luteal and premenstrual phases when progesterone rises and estrogen fluctuates, which can sometimes leave you feeling less confident, more irritable, or more prone to self-comparison. But especially if you are irregular or you have a feeling that your hormones are out of balance, it could be that the pill is artificially keeping you stable. Now, the first couple of months after quitting, you cannot really tell yet what your natural hormonal balance is like because it takes time for your body to go back to its normal levels of hormones. And in the beginning, the estrogen in your body can be very low. Personally, I went through such a roller coaster of emotions. Like, I felt deep sadness, numbness, mourn, all in different phases. And this led me to be this, well, in my head, kind of submissive, anxious, humorless version of myself. And I was constantly comparing myself to others and had these negative, intrusive thoughts, which were clearly totally different from my usual thoughts. And, I used to think that it was either random or that it depends entirely on external factors, but the truth is that is so much more on the inside than we think. When your hormones fluctuate, especially estrogen, your serotonin system doesn't stay untouched because estrogen plays a major role in how much serotonin you produce, how it's broken down, and even how sensitive certain serotonin receptors are. So when estrogen drops suddenly, like when quitting the hormonal birth control, your brain can temporarily experience lower serotonergic tone. And that shift can bias your brain towards more threat perception, more social withdrawal, more self-comparison, and more intrusive thoughts. And in my case, I kind of entered power saving mode and I didn't know how to get out because my brain was interpreting the world as slightly, well, maybe a bit more than slightly, threatening than before. If you want to go deeper into how hormones influence mood, confidence, and also what role the birth control pill plays in it all, I'm going to make a much more detailed video about that soon. But for now, I want to give you something practical. Start by observing. Track your cycle, track your mood, your energy, and your confidence levels. If you are on the pill and you don't always take it regularly, pay attention to whether your mood fluctuates when your consistency fluctuates. Because hormonal contraceptives work by maintaining steady synthetic hormone levels. So inconsistency might sometimes create small hormonal shifts that affect how you feel. And if you suspect that your hormones are out of balance, if you have irregular cycles, extreme PMS, things like hormonal acne or sudden mood changes, the first step is, of course, always to talk to a medical provider or doctor. But alongside medical guidance, there are lifestyle factors that can support hormonal balance, such as getting consistent sleep, adequate dietary fats, resistance training, stress management, and blood sugar stability. Okay, now that we are done talking about how to increase both serotonin and your physical health to get to a state of changing your wiring, let's talk about this. For a long time, scientists believed that the brain was mostly fixed after childhood. That who you were, your confidence, your intelligence, your tendencies were more or less set. But that's not what modern neuroscience shows. We now understand something called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming and strengthening new neural connections throughout life. Your brain is adaptive tissue, and it changes in response to repeated experience. Now, your brain doesn't change because you wish it would, it changes because it detects patterns. It learns from real outcomes. That's why if you want to change your wiring, your confidence, you need to collect small, real wins. Now, here's where this entire video comes together. That rewiring process becomes significantly easier when your biology is supportive. When your serotonin system is functioning well, your brain becomes much more likely to interpret experiences as safe, rewarding, and worth repeating. And you support that system by getting enough tryptophan, adding some supplements if you need to, see if you can practice gratitude and recall past successes, exercise, and making sure your hormonal foundation isn't working against you. You see, when I quit the pill, I knew that my mindset stayed exactly the same and that my confidence crashed because my biology changed. And if anything, that should tell you that confidence is more than something untouchable, something mystical. It's also a physiological state of our bodies. To disclaim that a bit, of course, it's not just your body, but you know that. I wish the world was as simple as slapping a clear cause effect band-aid on all your problems, as I sure do you. But your confidence is the flavor of broth you're brewing out of both your mindset, so the conversations you are having up here, and the state of your body. Now, when it comes to having these small real wins that I talked about during this hardware update period, here is the good part. You only need to win in your eyes. And that's where mindset comes in. Let me tell you a little secret. Everyone lives in a different interpretation of reality. Winning doesn't have to mean building $1 million business or being the middle point of the fan group. It can be every time you act in alignment with your own values or every time that you conquer a tiny fear. Because every small value-aligned action gives your brain new evidence. When you change your internal definition of winning, you change the data you feed your nervous system. And over time, that will change how automatically confident behavior feels for you. I'm Sydney, hopes I helped you out with this video a bit. Good luck to you and hope to see you in the next.